Hello and welcome to 100% Real with Ruby. Today I have Aiden Moore.
It's pronounced Muir.
There we go. Aiden Muir. And there are two things that I get the opportunity to rant about with him that I never could rant on in the same way to anyone else, because he gets it and he posts the same thing. And you know me. You know that I say 1,600 calories is not your maintenance. Regardless of whether you are not losing a pound, regardless of whether your body isn't changing, despite all the things that you're doing, it's not your maintenance. There are things that come into play here. And Aiden and I were ranting on about the fact that people say you have to eat this many calories, or you have to eat this much of this chocolate or these cookies to gain a pound of fat. And it grinds my gears a lot because you're equating calories to body fat gain or calories to weight gain and the scale moving and it being body fat. You're equating last night's fest or the long weekend's overeating to equating to this amount that's going to go up on the scale that is from fat. And it just doesn't simply work that way. The 3,500 calorie rule for a pound of fat isn't true. It's the same as why 1,600 calories is not your maintenance. For example, I'm so far 300 calories up from where I was before, and I haven't gained a pound, and I've been doing that for weeks. The metabolism does not work the way that you believe it to. So with that, Aiden, please rant away, and I think that's a great way to introduce you to everyone listening here. Go for it.
Sure thing. So 3,500 calorie rule for a pound of body fat, or I call it the 7,700 calorie rule for a kilo of body fat. It comes from the fact that a kilo of body fat is made up of around 7,700 calories. You could do the same for a pound and 3,500 calories. And there's many people who are very good at simplifying nutrition who take it one step too far by saying that if you ate that above your maintenance, that's what it would take to gain a kilo of body fat. But that's just not true. Multiple reasons. One, the rule assumes, if we take it quite literally, that 100% of those calories get stored as body fat. And there are so many reasons why that's not true. One, for a second, what if we gained any muscle? What if any of it was stored as glycogen? Your body weight would obviously spike by more on the scale. Everyone knows that, like due to other things like glycogen, water, whatever. But there's multiple angles here in terms of, would you absorb 100% of those calories? Great example here is the research shows that if we have almonds, for example, we might absorb 70 to 80% of those calories. That's not even talking about the thermic effect of food, that's literally talking about how much we're absorbing. Obviously, the more processed the food is, typically the more likely we are to absorb 100% of the calories, but we're not absorbing 100% always.
And then compare the nuts to the nut butter, because I know what research you're talking about.
Yeah, and like you are absorbing more there, yes, for sure. But then the next thing as well, though, that I want to go through is like thermic effect of food. It takes calories to eat and digest food. I often call this 10% of our calorie intake. So if somebody ate 2,000 calories, maybe 200 calories get spent on the thermic effect of food. If you eat really high protein, high fiber, it'll be higher than that. If you do the opposite, it'll be lower than that. But then we also talk about the impact on like incidental movement and like what we call NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. If you eat more calories, that'll typically increase. If you eat less, typically that will decrease. All of that to say is that theoretically, the 7,700 calorie rule is always going to undershoot in terms of how much body fat is gained. It is never going to be exactly 1 kilo of body fat. It always has to, by definition, be less, because it will always come out as less than that after you account for changes in energy expenditure, let alone changes in absorption and stuff like that too.
Yeah, and this is where that whole metabolism is dynamic, and there are so many different factors that come into this. And your calories in, like just because you're in a deficit on paper because of your calories in doesn't mean that you're ever going to lose weight. Like just because it says these are my deficit calories, I'm going to lose weight. No, because if you're a couch potato, good luck doing that. And it's not because that your calorie deficit doesn't work. It's because that's not a calorie deficit for you. And moving on to a different tangent that I think is extremely important. People, like, there are two different spectrums. There are people that understand that movement is important. And then there are those that have such a resentment to it because of diet culture. And then they figure, like, they get to this point where, why is nothing working for my body? Well, if you're walking 5,000 steps a day. You're not prioritizing movement. There is a lot to be said for your metabolism in that movement scheme of things, like up to 2,000 for some people. Let's talk on that.
Yeah, 100%. Like we know that like people burn a bunch of calories at rest just through BMR, like based metabolic rate, or RMR as well. But general movement, training, all these things, like general movement for a lot of people probably accounts for nearly 30% of their calorie expenditure if they're pretty active. If somebody's like not active at all, it becomes a very small amount. And like, you know, you're talking about like, I don't know, like you could talk about how like 1,600 calories for maintenance, like in terms of, is that somebody's maintenance? But we could even take another angle there and be like, most people maintain their weight on higher than 1,600 calories, just as a bit of a talking point. If somebody was just not active at all, they didn't really train, they didn't really do much general activity, they were shorter, more sedentary, etc., etc., suddenly they could have quite low maintenance calories. And is it so much that things aren't working, or just that they have low maintenance calories and need to do something that would be perceived as more extreme or something like that based on that?
Exactly. And this is why I don't even say 1,200 calories anymore, because that's getting blown out enough as it is. People are living on 1,500 to 1,600 calories, thinking that there is something wrong with their body. But people that come, like people like our audience, there is no way on earth that 1,600 calories would be your maintenance, not unless you're 5'2". 4'2". Even if you're 5'2", because most people here want to look amazing, meaning you're training your ass off. And if you're training your ass off, 1,600 calories would still not be your maintenance unless there is something metabolically wrong and you get literally about 3,000 steps a day. Because if you get 3,000 to 5,000 steps a day and you're in that really low range, then okay, possibly if you only train for 3 hours a week, maybe 4 hours if you're lucky. And I want you to keep talking on that point, also highlighting the fact that it's more than just steps that comes into this. And this is why your calories in impacts your calories out, and your calories out impacts your calories in. If you're doing a lot of energy, like if you're burning yourself out in the gym, because I remember when I was someone like, honestly, I know my tracking. I've been tracking since I was in year 10 at school. I was eating everything to the T at 1,400 calories, smashing my ass in the gym 6 days a week, and my body would not release body fat. Why? Because everything I was slogging away in the gym doing had me on my bed the other hours, like literally on my bed, not even moving my body. And this is where there is a difference between getting in steps and your actual NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And if you're watching the video, everything you see me doing here is NEAT. Me blinking and moving my head around and moving my body around is NEAT. When you're walking, if you're walking like this, there is less energy being burnt. If you're actually walking, there is more energy being burnt. Discuss.
Yeah, that's basically how I describe to a lot of people. Like I always talk about how I talk with my hands. And I'm like, if you gave me like low calories for an extended period of time, probably going to talk less with my hands, probably going to be a bit more still. In relation to training, the side of things where this started to really become apparent to me is like, I have historically mostly just been lifting weights. I've recently started like marathon training and stuff like that. Long runs on a Sunday. If I'm running 20 plus Ks, the hours after that run, I'm doing nothing, hey. And people often think about this being like, let's say I burnt 700 calories through exercise in a day. We often simply think about this by being like, okay, I normally burn X amount of calories. I've now burnt 700 on top of that. It's X plus 700. But it's not really once you factor this all in. If you moved less throughout the day because of this, you haven't now burnt 700 calories extra. Maybe it's 500, maybe it's 400, maybe it's 300 once you account for this movement. But going the other direction with that NEAT type of stuff as well in relation to calories, if you decrease calories, typically NEAT decreases. If you increase calories, typically NEAT increases. It would be rare for something to increase by more or decrease by more than the stimulus placed upon it. Like if I ate 300 calories more, it's not like my NEAT is going to increase by 400 calories, but something like 100 calories isn't too unrealistic. And with the whole metabolism being dynamic, this is where we see large individual variation here, where some people might be more hyper responders than others, where they might have a larger increase or decrease in their NEAT in response to changes in calories as well.
Yeah, and it works both ways, sadly. So, for example, like I was saying with me, my calories are really freaking high right now because I move a lot, and because I have ADHD, that has me move a lot even more. When I'm in a deficit phase, it impacts everything, including my training. I don't want to do big, demanding lifts. I want to use more stable lifts. There is less energy being burnt in my training itself, even though we don't train to burn calories. I adapt hard on the way down as well. And just because, this is going on a different tangent, just because you're able to build your calories really high up in our quote unquote reverse diet doesn't mean that you can then diet on lower calories.
Yeah, a lot of people have talked about this, particularly in relation to reverse dieting, just being like, can we theoretically build up our calories really high and then it'll make the next diet easy? And when you just look at the maths on it, it just doesn't seem to matter, because it's like, it adapts so quickly that it's like, after all that time spent quote unquote building things up, spend a short period of time in a deficit, it just reverses it very quickly anyway. It goes in both directions.
Exactly. And like, it does to some degree, to the degree that, number one, like the only reason it did for, I'm just going to bring me up again as an example, it did for me by quite a lot, simply because of the fact that my training capacity went all the way up. Like the volume, total volume that I do in a session is more than 5 times what it used to be when I started, because I'm stronger. I built more muscle. And this is where muscle does actually burn a lot more than people are now trying to diminish. Like first we went from it burns so much to now it doesn't burn a lot. Well, it actually does, because of what that muscle can now do. It can lift a lot more in training. And yes, training isn't meant to burn calories, but it doesn't mean that calories are not burnt. It's just that if you make that your focus, you're not going to look the way that you want to look. And like you said, with the just because you eat 300 calories, this is why I'm such a proponent of carbs. Because if you try to just increase fats versus increase your carbs, there is a huge difference in how your body is going to respond to that. My body thrives off carbs. It gives me so much energy. Then if someone instead increased their fats, it's not going to have the same impact that those carbs would, when your body is literally, it's your main fuel source. But I wanted you to go into how metabolic flexibility and insulin sensitivity can impact on this. Or when someone's like really overweight, I personally find, maybe you can explain the science behind this. I personally find that backloading with a lot more aerobic work and trying to like make their quote unquote mitochondria more efficient at using energy, building up their aerobic base, allows them to have an easier time like using energy, losing weight. But if you don't have that aerobic base, you're not going to be able to do that. And you'll find that you're recycling. Wait, that's too scientific. You'll find that you're getting to burny when you walk up the stairs, as an example. Like you're getting a lot more of that, what is called lactate buildup. You're not able to do as much for as long. But just on the fact that when people that do have a lot more weight to lose, because they're not insulin sensitive, they're not metabolically flexible, how does this all fit into the piece?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd have the exact same take as you. Like, obviously, I still have most people try to build an aerobic base, try to do all these things, general health, all those kind of things. Like, I still think that's a very good point. One thing I would question with the insulin sensitivity type of thing, and whether it really matters for this, is if we go extreme with case studies, like theoretically, that should mean people with quite progressed type 2 diabetes, particularly if not medicated, should have a much tougher time losing weight on the same calories. Would you agree based on that kind of logic?
Based on that logic, yes, but we know that's not true.
But we know that's not true. You could then take other takes and be like, maybe this affects other downstream habits and stuff like that. Maybe this means it affects their impact. I would understand that argument, but like with the calories being matched and everything being matched, it's like, oh no, like we still see them fine. Like
I want to go into the behaviors part, because that's something that a lot of people struggle with, especially cravings and energy.
Yeah, and like that's where it gets complex. Like you could be like, if somebody had higher blood glucose levels and higher insulin levels, does that therefore mean that they have higher cravings and stuff like that? The type 2 diabetes one is a bit interesting, because it's like a lot of people make the assumption that because the insulin levels will be higher because it's trying to get the job done but not succeeding because of insulin resistance, that it's going to increase cravings. One tiny thing that I would contemplate on that though is like, if your body's so resistant to insulin, it's not doing its actions. Therefore, it doesn't even matter if it's high, it's still not getting the job done. So I'm like, it's hard to say if that even impacts cravings at all. And there's just so much going on with, say, type 2 diabetes and stuff like that, to be like, is that why cravings are higher, or is there all these other reasons?
This is why it's so important to get your body into a healthy place. Like whatever you give your body, for example, if you're getting way too much insulin in, you're going to become insulin resistant. If, like, we know that, well, for example, the fullness signals of leptin that we talk about when it comes to dieting and all of that, if you have more fat cells, technically you should have way more leptin and you shouldn't be hungry at all. But we know that's technically not the case, because now you've had so much leptin that your body's become resistant to it. And this is why a healthy body is a responsive body. But a healthy body needs to be within we've lost what a healthy body fat percentage looks like. We're so busy chasing the Instagram body fat percentage that we forgot that, hey, why don't we just focus on health first? And I always come up against this conundrum, not within myself, but with other people, thinking that it's either one or the other. You're either health focused or you can actually improve your physique. But I want people to understand that by being health focused and mindset focused, because I'm very mindset focused as a coach, health, mindset, even performance focused, by focusing on those three things, you will inevitably get your aesthetic goals. They are not different. By not focusing on fat loss anymore does not mean you are not going to get the fat loss results if you focus on the health focused behaviors. We're talking about someone who's more overweight now and in that category.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the little secrets to my success on Instagram is seeing a little bit of nuance. Like some people, like, you can never focus on aesthetics ever. You have to only ever focus on health, or like whatever it is. And like, I see overlap between all of them. Just like, it's like a little, like I could have 50% of my focus on health and 40% on performance and then 10% on aesthetics. And like using a bit of nuance there, like using an example, because I work in the powerlifting space heaps, right? And in many cases, it could make sense for a powerlifter to move up a weight class to be a better powerlifter. Taking a little moment though, sometimes I'll be working with somebody who just doesn't want to. They don't want to move up for life reasons. Other people are black and white thinkers who are just performance focused. Might be like, you should move a weight class because that'll make you a better powerlifter. But then you could look at the other variables and be like, health focus, what if the best place for somebody to be was a super heavyweight? Powerlifting is not paying the bills for most people. It's a bit of a hobby at the end of the day for a lot of people. They might make a bit of prize money, but like, does it make sense to be a super heavyweight if you don't even want that just because it'll help your performance? Like sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. The next thing is like the aesthetic side of thing, just being like, sometimes people just want to be a little bit leaner. Like we're not even talking about that Instagram level lean. Like sometimes they just want to be a little bit leaner and they're okay with their performance being 5% worse in that trade-off. Like, I just think nuance in that space. Like, I rarely see people really enjoy their life if aesthetics is like 100% of their focus. So there is a line where it's too far, but I do think like a little bit, like for some people, totally fine, it makes sense.
Yeah, and the reason this is so understand is because sometimes switching focus and not focusing on fat loss is probably the best thing you can do to get the fat loss results when your whole life has been focused on fat loss, which is what most of my listeners anyway have probably found themselves in, because most of their life has been on cleaner. Well, has that worked for you the past 10 years of your life? Maybe you need to switch your focus if your current focus isn't working. Like, you can try to glam it up and do it up with whatever shiny polish you want, but in essence, your philosophy is still the same for this approach. So you're not going to get to where you want to be until you allow yourself to get the diet residue out of your brain. You're fatigued. And I know that Josh Does Health, one of your guys, did a post recently on why it's so important to have these short periods away from maintenance. And that is not going to be effective whatsoever if you still have your mind on fat loss, because you're not allowing yourself to undo the mental fatigue. Fat loss resistance is literally a byproduct of the residue of fatigue from dieting for so long. It's nothing to do with your metabolism not working.
Yeah, it's a big part of why I'm also performance focused as well, because it's like, if you're performance focused, you can't be striving for a deficit year round. And even taking the performance out of it, if I'm working with somebody who just wants to lose weight for health, lifestyle, whatever reasons, and they have quite a large amount to lose, I'm really big on those maintenance phases as well. For so many reasons, like actually going deep on this. One is that kind of diet fatigue thing you talked about. Something I often struggle with is if somebody had unintentionally been in a maintenance phase because they were trying to lose fat, but they didn't succeed for a variety of reasons. And them kind of being like, but I've already had a maintenance phase, it's time for me to like they're different things. Because like intentionally striving for maintenance, you're going to do so many different behaviors. You might be trying to raise your carbohydrate intake, but you're going to do it in a different way. like you're going to be choosing more whole grains, more fruits, more like those kind of things at certain times, versus if you're unintentionally maintaining your weight, your calorie intake's higher, but you've gotten there in different ways, most likely less nutrient dense ways as well. And then going deeper just beyond the like mental fatigue side of things or the diet fatigue side of things, we could talk about like metabolic adaptation, which we're already talking about a little bit. We could talk about the impact that trying to be in a fat loss phase for an extended period of time has on your appetite, particularly if you're succeeding, you're staying in a calorie deficit. But another one that is worthwhile thinking about is feeling what it feels like to feel good, fuel good, train under circumstances where you have been trying to feel good. And the final thing, just going back to that generic, just long weight loss journey, most people have a goal of maintaining their progress at the end. And we know that what actions you need to take in the fat loss phase are different to what need to be taken in a deficit. Sorry, not in a deficit, at maintenance at the end. Example, if somebody wants to lose half a kilo per week, I'm not going to butcher the 7,700 calorie rule, but it's like it probably requires at least a 500 calorie deficit per day on average. If that person then wants to maintain at the end, they have to increase their intake by around 500 calories on average. And obviously these are moving targets and stuff like that. But the point I'm getting at is at the end of it, you have to be doing different things to maintain than at the start. There's a lot of habits that overlap, but if you never spent any time trying to maintain, you wouldn't have had any practice, you wouldn't know what it feels like. And you also have the risk of like, what if you take your foot off the gas too hard and you accidentally add too many at the end, like add too many calories. So many reasons why I like maintenance phases.
Yeah, exactly that. And the thing is, if you do take your foot off the gas too much, you're not going to freak out about it because you have proof and I don't know a different word for philosophy, your way of thinking your way of thinking about the journey has transformed. You have proof that you know that you can maintain your weight. You have proof that you know you can stick to your diet. Because that was one of the biggest things that stopped me, because I did not believe that I could stick to the protocols that I was given. So I avoided doing what I needed to do, because what if I do blow out too far?
Yeah.
But it was from the simple fact that I didn't have proof that I could stick to XYZ for a long period of time. And when I did stick to XYZ, I hated my life. I was miserable. I was hungry. I didn't want to, that is the reality of so many people yo-yoing around in there, which you also brought up the hunger effect, blah, blah, blah. But then people swear up and down that their diet isn't working for them. The diet is working. It's just that you have blinders on. You're not aware to all these other things that are factoring in. There is no way on earth that you are giving. It's almost like when you start a training session, you go balls out. I'm just going to say balls out. You go balls out on your A series, your first set of exercises. Are you going to have that same balls out feeling and mentality and effort percentage, like actual effort, not relative, absolute effort percentage on your last exercises as you would on your first ones? Because I highly doubt it. If you have a squat at the end versus a squat at the beginning as the same exercise, just so you can do an experiment to see if it's the same, and then you have all your other shit in between, they're not going to be the same. And that's the same with your diet. You are going to have that residue fatigue. You are not going to be giving it your best effort. Relatively, you feel like you're giving it your absolute best. You failed the lift, you're maxing it out. But when you look at them in comparison, you do not perform the same.
Yeah, 100%. Going with a different angle on something that you touched on earlier in relation to, it's almost like believing that stuff's going to work. If you, the protocols you're talking about, it's hard to implement hard protocols if you don't even believe they're going to work, kind of thing. And I don't go super deep on mindset stuff, but the same thing I talk about with fat loss as well. There's a lot of people I work with who've never felt like they've had sustained success with fat loss. And it's really interesting in terms of how that would then change your decisions and behaviors in relation to trying to do some of the hard stuff, like saying no to certain stuff when you're a little bit hungry, not starving, but when you're a little bit hungry, not instantly trying to get rid of that feeling by eating or anything like that. And so interesting that in many other areas of our life, we can work hard at stuff because we believe it's going to pay off. If somebody's working on their business, they put in work under the belief that's going to help their business. If somebody's in a career, they can work hard in their career, believing that's going to lead to success. If somebody's trying to learn a new language, they believe that if they spend an hour a day, it's going to lead to stuff. Similar kind of stuff with the fat loss stuff, being if you believe that you're going to succeed, whether you trick yourself into that belief or whatever you need to do, probably improves the odds of success as well, because then it helps you actually take the actions as well.
Because I believe you can't get anywhere your mind doesn't actually believe you can. And this being doing marathons now as well, because I know the chart, because it's almost you get to a certain point, it's I just need to make it to this part of the this doorpost, and then you trick yourself into that, and then you're you know, I have to make it to the next one. But yeah, I made it now. I just need to make, and you like make these little mental tricks with yourself just to make it to the end, because you know that you can make it to the end. You believe you can make it to the end because there is a specific endpoint there. But if you're leaving it out to freaking running to Kuala Lumpur, I think I just made that up, and I hope I did because I want to be really far away. But if you're trying to run to Kuala Lumpur, you're not going to put in the same strategies to try to get yourself to the end because you don't know when the friggin' hell it's going to even end. It's like the mouse study where when they actually were they pulled them out of the water from trying to struggle to drown to give them like a little respite, they could actually get out of it. But if they never believed that there was an end to their struggle in the water in the bucket, they just died and drowned. But the others, they kept going for like a whole day because they knew there was going to be an end to the suffering, that there was something on the other side. But no one takes that approach into dieting. And that is why so many struggle. Well, what else do you think people struggle with when it comes to nutrition just in general, when it comes to trying to get there? Most people come to us with body goals.
Yeah, there's multiple angles I could go with that. One thing that I do think a lot of people struggle with is black and white thinking and struggling with seeing shades of grey. So examples, good versus bad foods. In the literature, they call it dichotomous thinking. I'm either on my diet or I'm off my diet. Sugar is bad. I can't have anything with sugar, so on and so forth. So many angles with that. Like the black and white thinking, and also another little tangent on there, but like when off track, going further off track, just the whole like, screw it, I've ruined my diet, I might as well keep going. That one stands out to me being like, I don't know how to describe it, but when I learned about calories and macros, there was a bit of an unlock for me in terms of like, not taking this too far, but like you can stretch things out on a bit of a longer time horizon in terms of weekly instead of just daily, and being like, okay, I've had this one little thing on top of my maintenance calories or whatever, however you want to view it, or like one bad thing or whatever. And when you scale it out across a week, across a month, you're like, this is not a big deal. But something that we very much see in the real world is somebody's like, oh, I've ruined today, I'll keep going. And it could even be worse being like, what if they ruin their day on Thursday? Maybe they're like, oh, rest of the week's off, I'll start again Monday. And it's so clear how much better people's progress would be if they just stopped at that first thing and then just go back into their normal life after that and back into their routine, rather than extending it further than that.
There's a really important note that I used to get so triggered by when I saw it online, because I used to always pull up on this one. People saying, just get back on track. And I don't think that serves anyone, because if you're just going to get back on track without pausing to figure out what the hell led you off track, it's going to keep recurring. It's like the same issue will keep coming up until you address what that issue is. And most of the time, it's not a food problem. It's never a food problem. It's always something outside of that. It's almost like when people have snacking problems, it's probably a boredom issue or a procrastination issue or a lack of, I don't believe, like a lack of self-worth in the work that you're doing. If we go into the deeper meta whatever stuff, like people literally do not have self-worth at their job. So then they worry about everything. So then they procrastinate. So then because their mind is so busy, they then try to distract that with food. It's like there are so many things that can impact you in that sense that you need to figure out what it is and address that instead of trying to get stricter on yourself. Yeah,
100%. Like I saw someone else posted on Instagram in terms of kind of like stop, reflect, and then move on. Like don't dwell on it for too long, but like take a moment, just think about it and be like,
I like that.
What could I do differently? Yeah.
I like that a lot. And that's something that you should take into this whole journey, because it, like, you can apply it to anything. Even if like you're not happy with your training performance, what could you have done differently instead of beating yourself up for having a poor performance? That's something I used to do all the time. And then what does that lead to? It leads to an unhealthy relationship with exercise. Like you start to lose motivation over time because it's not a motivation issue there. I want to circle back because I know that there are some really common, actually, no, let's go back to performance. Just one more. What do people usually struggle with when it comes to nutrition for both health and performance? Knowing that if our performance is there and our health is there, it can lead to those body goals, but we tend to make mistakes when it comes to our performance, which stops us seeing the physique we want, because you can't nutrition your way to muscle without the performance there.
Yeah. I'm going to go strictly performance with this one and focus on a bit of a specific angle. It's probably less relevant to people who are like tracking calories day in, day out, weeks on end, like, and more people who aren't that level of consistent. Something I see super commonly is what I call like underfueling at times, not necessarily on average. So like maybe their calorie intake across the week is sufficient enough for them to maintain their body weight, but their game plan for Monday through Thursday, for example, works as a decent sized deficit, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday is substantially higher. And the higher calories on those days isn't the most nutrient dense, like not the most micronutrient dense. And it's almost like that Monday through Thursday, they're underfueling, they're going into each session with maybe lower glycogen stores, maybe just not feeling as good, maybe feeling like they're in a calorie deficit. And their micronutrient intake also by definition is probably lower because they are sacrificing some stuff there. Maybe some other things is lower, like their fiber, which would affect health and other stuff. But the point I'm getting is like, yeah, underfueling at times, but not necessarily on average.
Now, this is my favorite. I think I tagged you in that post I did as well with where this is not the same as, like, even though it equals the same calories at the end of the week, they're not the same. And that is why your fat loss phase is not working if you're in a fat loss phase doing that. That is why you're probably even your lean building phase, because most people aren't going to be just like eating super excess, and most people's realistic surplus calories isn't all that high. That's why you're not building muscle, because you're not actually fueling the work properly, which is why that's why I like to call nutrition performance nutrition. Because if you focus on trying to feel your best for training and fuel your best for training, you'll inevitably, in my eyes, get to the physique you want if you're also educated. Well, if you have a coach, especially, if you just focus on the performance nutrition, the coach would be making sure that all the rest falls into place. Otherwise, if you don't have a coach, just understanding how it's not just carbing up for the training session itself or just having carbs around the training. You still need to make sure that you're fueling your lifestyle if you have a busy lifestyle, and fueling your recovery, because you only adapt from what you recover from. So just saying, I'm just going to eat like an amazing pre-workout meal and then have like a tiny salad for lunch and snack your way through to dinner and then have whatever the family's having for dinner, that is still not performance nutrition.
Yeah, for sure. And I do things just to like feel what it feels like for certain people, certain clients, whatever. And an example I often use is a lot of clients come asking for like relatively large deficits, say like at least a 1,000 calorie deficit. And it's pretty easy for me to get lean, like in comparison to the average person, but I normally don't go that hard or try to lose that quickly. And like I've tried it, and day one feels fine, day two feels fine, day three, low energy, hungry, etc., etc., etc. But I'm using that example in relation to kind of what we're talking about, not even just like trying to be in a deficit, but just that whole underfueling and then overfueling, just being like that day three training session for me would not feel as good. Let's say I was doing a squat day or something like that. I don't feel as good during that squat day in that situation. And taking the other angle, what I like to have people imagine is like, imagine just feeling well day in, day out, day in, day out. And imagine I go into that same squat session and I just feel good. Do I get more reps out? Which part of the session does it affect most? For me, maybe it's the accessory work later in the session, maybe just the feeling better. And like, this is a little, I know it's another tangent, but like a little thing that's often like missed in the research, I reckon. So like in research, people are often just pushed to failure. They have accountability. It's almost like a gun to your head type situation, and you've just got to get the reps. I think this affects a lot of areas of research as well. Like I also think this affects like menstrual cycle related research in terms of like all these systematic reviews that find that people's performance on average seems similar at all phases of the menstrual cycle or whatever. There's not that much of a difference. But the real world situation is a bit different in that if I go to the gym by myself, there's no accountability, no one's watching me, I'm just doing my reps or whatever. How I feel does make a difference. Like if I had a lot of alcohol tonight and then went to train tomorrow, it's probably going to be a terrible session. But if I had a gun to my head and it was like research setting, how close can I get to my optimal performance? I'd probably get surprisingly close. Without all that pressure, I'd be surprisingly far away from that, I reckon.
That's actually huge, because I find the same with like having a training plan. Like if you don't have a training plan and you're just making it up, you're not going to give the same level of effort. And if you're changing up your sessions every couple of weeks, you're not going to give the same effort because you have nothing to base it off to then be like, I need to push my performance, which is why sometimes most of the time, changing your training because it's a new month isn't actually benefiting you there. And you mentioned something amazing, which is the whole like you had the bad training session, but this leads into the catastrophizing and the black and white thinking. What usually happens when you have a bad training session? It starts to it plays in your mind. And if you're in that whole like burn energy, burn calories, training equates to me being able to eat this, eat that. If you're still stuck in that diet mentality, now that's going to sabotage you even more than just the general person who would say that's a bad training session and then just slugging around for the rest of the day because you feel like ass. There's like two different types of sabotage, one obviously more extreme. And then you mentioned feeling good. Most people don't know how good it feels to feel good. I didn't know how good it feels to feel good until I got to where I am now. And one of my clients came to me, and when we started, one of her first questions and concerns with me, because I'm like, you're very quiet, what's the matter? And we had chats over the whole first week about how she was feeling like she wasn't good enough in training. She wasn't giving enough in training. And then I finally asked the question, try to get her to explain. I actually don't know what you mean by that now, because I was trying to like explain other things, but then she came back with an answer. But I'm walking out with more energy and I'm having more energy in the day. So I obviously didn't give enough in training. It's like people are so used to slugging themselves in training, underfueling. Like she was scared of carbs before because she was this brings into a certain topic, because she was menopausal. So she thought that it was best to have lower carbs and she needed to be on lower calories, and that was her maintenance. Yet she was training with like HIIT and powerlifting style stuff both together. It's like, no wonder you felt like ass. No wonder you weren't losing fat on those calories. You were like sitting on your ass 24/7 outside of that because you were so fatigued all day and slugging around, like we went on about the NEAT thing. But you get asked quite a few questions, and I know that two of the main ones. We'll start off with menopause first. There are a lot of menopause nutrition myths that are laying around, and menopause protocols and menopause detox drinks and this special like hormone fix for menopause, and things are different at menopause. Calories don't work the same. I was kind of proud that once someone had shot me down for putting something on menopause, it doesn't work the same. I had people that were over 50 comment on it saying, sorry honey, it actually does for me. I'm 55 and I'm in the best shape of my life. It works. And I'm like, fuck yeah, thank you for speaking up. Like, people need to do more of that. But yeah, menopause.
Yeah, it's a complex topic. It's actually one of the few things I haven't put out heaps and heaps of comprehensive nutrition stuff on, for multiple reasons. One of the reasons is it's like the biggest area for criticism and stuff like that. The second thing is like there are some small changes here and there and stuff like that. Obviously symptoms is a big deal and stuff like that, doing things you can do to address symptoms and everything like that. Like, so it's like there are changes in relation to that, but then there's also a lot that doesn't change, which therefore makes it hard to like put out content without being dismissive or anything like that. Going deeper in terms of like what I mean with like the doesn't change type of stuff is like, although there is a bunch of hormonal changes and everything like that, sometimes people think it requires a complete overhaul of basic nutrition concepts. Examples, some protocols are like carbs are good up until a certain stage, then menopause happens, then you need to go low carb from that point because of XYZ reason. And they're talking about it specifically in relation to body composition. And we could do the same thing about being like, okay, let's look for a randomized control trial that sets up all variables being equal, calories, protein, etc. But one group goes low carb, one goes low fat, and let's see what happens. And like every time we see that type of stuff, the outcome comes out the same. And it's like, okay, we don't need a magical protocol for that. But you could go deeper down and be like, what if people have hot flushes and then that affects their sleep and then that carries over to, it's like, is there anything we can do in relation to that? And you can see more logic with like the stuff on the outer edges. It's just like the so-called big rocks don't change. Like even if I was using the sleep example, it's like, we don't suddenly just ignore all aspects of sleep hygiene to address this one thing that could then carry over to better sleep. It's like we still focus on all aspects of sleep hygiene and then maybe do something on top as well.
Yeah, it's like everything stays the same, except you need to be more intentional working your way around the symptoms. Like for some people, increasing, I want to know what your take is and if you have any specifics, but some clients would find that increasing their soy intake has actually improved some of their symptoms. So maybe you have anything that the listeners can take away, that, because I do have quite a lot of menopausal clients, and and menopausal listeners, I was meant to say. And it's like the symptoms are the main thing that you need to address, because it's the lack of sleep that usually impacts the results. And your quality of sleep would go down with that as well, because no one sleeps comfortably with hot flashes. No one sleeps comfortably when their progesterone is going however it's going. Like that's what you need to take into consideration, but it doesn't. I want to bring in the cortisol and the coffee in the morning and that stupid bullshit later. But if you have any any supplement or nutritional recommendations for any menopausal clients listening to this?
Yeah, so the soy thing is one of the most common ones, and it makes sense. The research is pretty supportive of that as well. Going a little bit rogue with this is just another one that's interesting, but ashwagandha like is another common recommendation that's coming out a bit more. Like it's not something that I just willy-nilly recommend to people, but if we look at all of the research looking at ashwagandha and stress, every single randomized control trial at this stage has found improvements in stress. I know that's not necessarily linked to menopause, but I'm going to take that a step further. I use that to kind of talk about, we for a long time have viewed that ashwagandha in the whole like alternative medicine kind of section, where it's like alternative medicine is either stuff that's been proven not to work, or it has not yet been proven to work, or it's not been proven to work. If we have like 7+ randomized control trials on that topic now, and all of them have shown positive outcomes for stress in this case, is it still alternative medicine? That's a starting point. But then if we go and look at all of the research that's looked at sleep, ashwagandha has helped sleep in all of the research that's looked at. There's less on that than there is on the stress type of thing. But when we look at it in relation to people around menopause, it seems to help with that as well. And it seems to help with a few other symptoms too. If we look at all the research looking at body composition, once again, all of it so far has been promising with small improvements. But it's one that I think is worth people looking into themselves and considering. But it's not something that I'm at a stage where I'm like, hey, everyone needs to go out and take this, because there's still not heaps of research in that space. It's an area where there's quite a few anecdotal, like negative stories as well, although there's obviously heaps of positive stories. It's just really hard to assess the anecdotal stuff as well. Like if somebody said the de-stressing thing, it made them feel like a zombie or emotionless or something like that. It's hard to say, being like, did the ashwagandha cause that, or was that placebo? So many angles to look at, but I also wouldn't ignore negative stuff as well.
Yeah, and I will also add in here that I found melatonin and magnesium to be probably the two most beneficial things that you can take before you sleep. Like melatonin, I am such a pusher of, especially as a female. And like your body, it's not the same as taking hormones, like your body, well, steroids, I'll say actually. It's not the same as taking testosterone, where it decreases your body's natural production. Like it will still be there. Melatonin allows you to sleep of a deeper quality. And same with magnesium. And magnesium also helps with stress. I would also argue melatonin helps a lot with stress because of its impact on your sleep.
Yeah. The point you made about the melatonin and like the steroid thing is great as well. Like it doesn't do that. And that's the first step I have with trying to like, open people up to considering melatonin. Just being like, it's not going to like destroy your natural production. Like the research has been done. Like that's fine. And then the other little thing that I like to point out is like, we already mess with our natural production. Like even if you were concerned about that, I'm not sure how much of an argument it is, because like, but at the time of recording, it's like 3:50 p.m. right now. But say we were recording at 7:50 p.m. I'm sitting in a room that has a light above me. That's destroying, quote unquote, my natural melatonin production. I've been sitting in a room all day that doesn't have windows. You could debate the health benefits of doing that. But I haven't been outside and looking at the sun and like assessing like how much blue light, how much red light with my eyes and stuff like that. That's kind of wrecking my melatonin production. I just like to highlight that it's like, there's a lot of people who are doing stuff every day that is quote unquote like wrecking their melatonin production, who are also concerned about having melatonin as a supplement before bed, when even though we've got the evidence that doesn't wreck that. And two, like you're doing stuff anyway. You're doing stuff anyway that affects it.
Actually, this is on a tangent just because I feel like this is an important point to put this in here, and that's if you're not actually getting out into nature and viewing nature, and you are up in a wooden box, that will have such an impact on, like, just hearing Aiden say that, my anxiety, like I felt my heart just start seizing. I'm like, that would give me so much anxiety. I need to have windows everywhere. So it's like, know what is most beneficial for your mental health and give yourself that, especially moving into perimenopause when you already have hormones working against you. The other part that I really want to touch on is collagen, what it does, what it doesn't. Because most people, well, a lot of people don't actually take it that much for joint and collagen and ligament health as they do for hair, skin, and nails because of vanity reasons. So I want to touch on the hair, skin, and nails section, and then any other stuff that you have on top of that. Oh, and also the fact that you should not really count it to, well, I'm just saying you can't really count it towards your protein intake because it has no bearing in muscle protein synthesis. What it is, what it isn't, hair, skin, and nails, and then the joints and the ligaments.
Yeah, gotcha. So I'm going to touch on that last one to start off with. So I mostly agree in terms of like shouldn't count it, but I have a caveat on that, or a twist on that. So let's say somebody had a low protein intake. Let's say they would benefit from 130 grams of protein. That would be optimal. And they're having 70. And 25 grams came from collagen. I think that would be very clearly suboptimal versus replacing that 25 grams with virtually any other protein source when it comes to muscle growth. Due to the amino acid profile, due to the effects we see on muscle protein synthesis. But let's say somebody would benefit from 130 grams of protein and they had, say, 140 with 25 grams coming from collagen. I'm far more open to that latter scenario and counting that as part of their total protein intake, just because it still has amino acids. It's just very low in certain ones and very high in other ones. But if you do end up with an abundance of all amino acids, I'm mostly fine with counting it if your total protein is high enough. The debatable point is just like whether the exact example I used there is high enough, like whether you'd have to go 145 or 150 or something like that. Like, that's my thoughts on that. In relation to like so you go.
I just want to quickly say on that though, but it wouldn't be beneficial if that is your only source around your workout. Like, you have the collagen protein as your protein source around your workout. That wouldn't be optimal then.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. Like, we could talk about like anabolic window, how big that is, et cetera, et cetera. But as a general rule, yeah, I agree on that point for sure. Which it does scare me a little bit when people like straight up just replace their protein powder with collagen powder under the assumption it's doing the exact same thing. The hair, skin, and nails thing. So like, I talk a lot about how I often just follow my interests. I post a lot about what I'm interested in. I'm just very fortunate that I'm interested in most areas of nutrition. The hair, skin, and nails thing is where you kind of lose me. But it's been one of the times that I've pandered to my audience in a way where it's like, I just kept getting bombarded with questions on skin particularly. So I don't know as much about the hair and nails thing, but the collagen for skin thing, I've looked at quite closely. And it's been surprisingly positive for skin. Like, if you look at things like skin elasticity and hydration, particularly if some damage has already occurred, it's even more promising. We now have a bunch of randomized control trials on it. Like, from memory, we're at least at 15, if not 20 randomized control trials looking at that. The research is positive. And a lot of the criticisms that people point to just fall away once you examine it closer. Like, one of the most common ones is it's like, oh, it's all industry funded research. And like, I could even talk about the fact that it's like, well, that makes sense. Like, who's going to fund a study on collagen? Probably the people like producing it, because they can make money if it works. But I'm not going to go that angle. If you look at the percentage and amount of how positive the collagen studies are done by industry funded sources, and then you compare to the collagen studies that are not industry funded, it's just as positive in the non-industry funded research. So it's like, okay, we've analyzed that claim, seems to have no bearing on the outcome. That we're at the point where we have enough studies looking at that to kind of come to that conclusion. People could talk about like the mechanisms through which it works, but it's like, well, firstly, we're comparing to placebo and we're seeing the outcomes are improved. We already have the data there. We could talk about mechanisms and being like, is this the amino acid profile? Is it the fact that collagen only features, it's the only hydroxyproline, a very specific amino acid? Is it to do with the collagen peptides? One of the things that really had me skeptical on collagen and skin health, particularly early on in this kind of journey, was that the amounts required seem to be so low. Like, when we're looking at stuff for joint health, I'm often recommending 15 grams or even higher in some cases. Some of these studies on skin health were using like 2.5 grams and finding positive outcomes. And I'm like, is that really like, is like, imagine if I had like 5 grams of whey protein and it's like, are my muscles getting bigger? Like, I don't know. But
that's actually an important point, because people think they need to take 25 grams for it. Like, I take 5 grams a day. You don't actually need all that much for hair, skin, and nail benefits. I'll let you talk about the stuff later.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I'm skeptical enough that I'm like, I don't know if 2.5 grams is going to convince me, but like, the research has been positive. If I was personally taking the hair, skin, and nails, I would take 5 grams. And it's one of those things that's like, even looking at it through a skeptical lens, I'm like, the research has been positive enough that it's like, oh, if I cared about that stuff, I would take it for those purposes.
With vitamin C, that would be a good one.
Yeah, with vitamin C, and like, even touching on that, I'm personally of the belief that if you have vitamin C through food, within a few hours of having collagen, you don't need to think about it. The reason why it matters so much in research and why it's always used in the research is because vitamin C is a water-soluble vitamin. And for research, they try to control for all variables. So they often have people fasted in many cases before taking the collagen, just to control for all variables. They do some training stuff. And because you need vitamin C for collagen synthesis, if you did a fasted training study or you're trying to measure it for skin health and you fasted completely outside of the collagen, which is not what they do on all these things, but like often they'll fast for it, they then it just wouldn't work. So it's like in a research setting, the vitamin C thing really matters. In the real world, we're probably going to tick that box without even thinking about it. Exceptions are more if people either just have a really low vitamin C intake, which is pretty rare, or they're having the supplement early in the day and they haven't had vitamin C.
That's why I don't recommend people supplementing with vitamin C yet. I very quite often see people come to me with vitamin C written in their supplement intake in like where they have their supplements. I want to end on your like what are the most common myths and what you wish more people understood and stuff, but I quickly want to say 3 things briefly, and then you can just summarize them in like 2 sentences. But 3 other things that I see people overconsume, as in like they consume it for no like a different benefit than what they think it's getting, like glutamine as an example. Like, yeah, it's great for gut health, but not the usual thoughts around it. Way too many people are drinking BCAAs thinking that it has its own benefit there. That's 1, 2. And then people there are people that take probiotics for bloating, which can actually exacerbate it for their reasons, because most of the people that are taking the probiotics are part of the underfueling side of the spectrum. Like, they're usually the people that are doing it. They're underfueling, they're overstressed, they're overtraining. They're the typical type of people that would go to probiotics for bloating versus what research shows and that kind of stuff. But like, for those reasons, if you had to summarize that in a couple of sentences each.
Yeah, so I'll move past the probiotic one because it's pretty complex. It depends on cases. I'll do the other one. So like the amino acid one, like, yeah, completely agree. Like, it's just it's just so simple. Like, it's a funny one where it's like, if you look at all of the research looking at BCAAs or essential amino acids and muscle growth, it actually looks really positive if you look at the individual studies. It's just if you take that one step back and think about it logically and also look at the research as a whole, it's like every time total protein intake is high enough, this doesn't seem to matter. And then also looking at the logic about being like, 1 scoop of whey protein has around as much branched chain amino acids as a serving of BCAAs, which is obviously a smaller serving. So it's like, even logically, like using other protein sources, you're getting an abundance of these amino acids anyway. Makes sense why we don't see more muscle growth when we have a high enough total protein intake. The glutamine thing, same thing. You can make logical leaps being like, glutamine is the most abundant amino acid in muscle. Surely supplementing it's going to help with muscle growth. You know what we need to do to just check that? Like, we can just do randomized control trials with high enough total protein intake and then supplement glutamine either as part of it or on top of it, and we're not seeing further increases. The gut health stuff you talked about, actually really promising. When I last checked, there was 4 randomized control trials looking at IBS and glutamine, and surprisingly positive, like seeing really good outcomes. I'm not yet at the point that I'm like blanket recommending it to every single person with IBS, but I'm like, there's enough there that I'm like, it's interesting and it's something that I'll recommend to people who are interested in it with the knowledge of what has been found so far.
Yeah, I did ages ago when I did like an antibiotic sort of thing, I took glutamine to kind of help with that process with my gut, because my gut was a mess from the antibiotics, and it helped. It helped immensely. Okay, so the last thing that I really want you to finish up on is, what are let's just say the 2 most common myths that irk you, and what are 2 things that you wish more people understood, cared about, prioritized more?
All right, so 2 common myths. Let's go. First one comes to mind: creatine causes balding. It's just kind of annoying because it's like, people just say it so factually, and it's like, okay, we've got 1, 2.
I'm not losing my hair, Aiden. I just started taking creatine.
Yeah, like that's the one that gets me. They're like, no, but my experience was I lost my hair when I took creatine. I'm like, you do know, like that stuff can just happen. Like you could have just been at a time in your life where that was going to happen. Anyway, I don't want to go too deep into that, but it's like, if we look at the research, there's one study from 2009 where DHT levels increase in rugby players. And that's kind of the source that's always cited when people cite like hair loss. And it's like, okay, firstly, they didn't measure hair loss. DHT levels increased, but they stayed within the healthy range all the time. Like, if you actually just look at somebody's DHT levels, it's typically just bouncing around in the healthy range. That happened, it's just in the study it increased. If we also looked at like what lifting weights does, lifting weights increases DHT levels within the healthy range as well. And no one's sitting there being like, oh, lifting weights made me bald. Like, and then the final thing beyond just being like hair loss has never been measured. It's like, read between the lines just a little bit. And like, I'm not the most skeptical person out there, but it's like, it's 2024. That sort of came out in 2009. The public has been worried about this concern for a long time. Why has nobody studied hair loss in creatine? And the common sense answer that I've kind of come to is it takes a long time to do research. And I think any researcher who's questioned this thing has kind of been like, nah, it's not worth it. It clearly just doesn't cause balding. Like, that's the only thing I can think of. Like, no one's willing to put in the work when it clearly just doesn't seem to be an issue. Anything on that before I go on to another myth?
I was just going to say, yeah, most people saying it are like, I just started creatine, my hair's falling out.
Yeah.
It's like, no, like you literally just said it's long term. Like, no, like I've been taking creatine for the last 9 years of my life. You've probably been taking it for the last 10 plus years of your life.
Yeah. Haven't gone bald yet. And if I did, I would not pin it down to creatine, I'll tell you that much. Anyway, the next one I'm going to talk through is protein damages kidneys. Let's just start with the assumption that you've got healthy kidneys at the baseline, because that's the easiest way for us to discuss this. The logic is largely based on the fact that the kidneys filter waste products from protein. Theoretically, that therefore means, based on that logic, that eating more protein puts more strain on the kidneys, which will lead to decline over time. Firstly, I just want to highlight a huge flaw in that logic. Exercise puts strain on my heart. Does that mean like I'm more likely to have a heart attack, or my heart's going to decline, or like whatever? No, there's many other areas in the world that, or in this kind of space, where we're like, that strain on the heart is probably a good thing that causes positive adaptation. I'm not here to try and make a claim that protein causes positive adaptations of the kidneys. That's not what I'm trying to say here. What I'm trying to say is I'm just trying to undermine that logic a little bit and just be like, that logic does not make sense. What we have to then do is then look at outcomes and be like, based on that logic, we should be able to see that when you increase protein intake for an extended period of time, that translates to people's kidney function declining over time. If you've got a massive group of people and ran that experiment, you should be able to see that. Based on what the research we have available, we do not see that. It becomes more of a discussion when people have lower kidney function at the baseline. I'm not going to go into the depths of like really, really bad situations like stage 5 chronic kidney disease or any like really bad acute kidney disease as well. But one thing that you would also know is that once people are over a certain age, most people actually have stage 3 chronic kidney disease. Over the age of about 60, if you just measured people's like glomerular filtration rate, a large percentage of people over the age of 60 have chronic kidney disease. We see all of this research looking at the benefits of increasing protein intake later in life for overall health outcomes, for all these things like falls prevention, all these other things. One thing we're not seeing is an increased rate of kidney decline. You could take that standpoint to pretty far in terms of like declined kidney function, but I'm not taking this angle about people with really far kidney function like declines. I'm really just talking about general population, because I know people who have great healthy functioning kidneys who have been told not to increase their protein intake because it'll destroy their kidneys, basically.
I get that. I see that around creatine. That actually brought up that whole like, I started taking creatine and my kidney function showed this, and it's like I just started training and my heart rate started going higher. It's the same thing. Like it correlates. It's like training makes your heart rate go higher. What do you expect? That's what I usually say with the creatine sort of thing. And what's one thing that you wish more people cared about? Let's say the biggest thing ever that you wish more people cared about.
In relation to nutrition, this is a bit of a boring one, but it's still an important one. It goes in both directions. There are diminishing returns the closer you get to perfection. This is something that, to a degree, also explains why there's many like elite level athletes who don't have perfect nutrition and stuff like that, but they do all right and stuff like that. I don't want to go too deep down that route, but like there's diminishing returns. The difference between 90% perfect nutrition and 100% is not that different. Because like, once again, like let's assume 100% is absolutely nailing your macros, absolutely nailing your micronutrients, absolutely nailing your meal timing and frequency. You've got every supplement under the sun perfect. You're doing all of the extras you can with antioxidants, polyphenols, all of those kind of things. You're perfect 100% of the time. 90%, pretty close results to that, like very, very close. 80%, pretty close results. Where I say it starts going in the other direction though, and why this goes both ways, is you can mess yourself up pretty far the further you get away from that. And appreciating this concept also means you probably appreciate how much more effort it takes to do 100% than 90% than 80%. Like the 100% thing means you could never have a single thing ever off. Like you could never have a meal out with friends that's not perfect. You could never do all these things. But with like 90%, you could have a meal off occasionally. Your life is like so much better and you're still like really, really good with nutrition. 80% gives you a little bit more margin of error. But the point I'm getting at with the whole this goes both ways is it's like being 80 to 90% quote unquote perfect, you're getting pretty much exactly the same results. You're getting so close, but it's so, so much easier. And where I'm like, I wish more people understood this is it's like, once you see that, you can't really unsee that. And you kind of go, oh, so the game is about being like 80 to 90% almost all of the time. And you don't have to take that super extreme. Like an example I always use is if an athlete competed in the Olympics, what do they do in the week after? They're probably not training at all. They're probably like pretty far from their nutrition. It's just the big picture. Most of the time they're doing a pretty solid job. And the logic I get with all of this is trying to be pretty on point with your nutrition for a long, long, long period of time takes you pretty far.
Yeah, and being 100% isn't perfect. It's prison. I love that. So is there anything that you want to leave the listeners with? So if you want to find Aiden on Instagram, you'll find him at, well, you'll find Ideal Nutrition, but you'll find him at Aiden_the_dietitian on Instagram, and Ideal Nutrition podcast if you want to get any nutritional sound bites as well, which is more on the digging into more of like the textbook questions and all that kind of stuff to debunk quite a lot of things. Anything else that you want to mention below?
No, those are the main things. Like we put out blog content. So our website's idealnutrition.com.au. So like I put out in-depth blog content there. That's the most, I suppose, complex, but the most in-depth. Then the podcast stuff is like a little bit shorter, probably like 20-minute episodes, going a little bit in-depth. And then the Instagram stuff, I try to make stuff as simple and easy to understand as possible. So you kind of get all three of those things as well.
I will say, because I know a lot of you are American listeners, make sure that you spell dietitian with a T. It's Aiden with a T. So with that, thank you for listening. And I'm excited for you to take some great notes away from this and apply it to your lifestyle so that you stop becoming so hard on yourself, realizing that the 100% don't create success. It always backfires. So with that, bye.